for our regular Sunday show, and we have an interesting one for you tonight. Now, for those of you who are joining us for the first time, I want to tell you a little bit about Ovis.news. Now, we are a group of people who are fed up with corporate news and the way that newsrooms are run. As a result, we decided to create the Ovis community with a mission to eradicate fake news by using revolutionary blockchain technology to determine what stories people want covered and how to make sure we are presenting just the facts. Now, we are a fast growing group of journalists, fact checkers, and news consumers, and we are reporters. All of us work together to make sure that the stories that reporters do are trusted, verifiable, and accountable to we the people for the people. Now, Ovis always brings stories to light that the corporate media doesn't always cover. And tonight, that's something that we plan to do. Now, it feels like it was a really long time ago, but it was just a couple of weeks ago that the Georgia election took place. If you remember the runoff that took place in Georgia for two U.S. Senate seats, that actually, the two races that completely turned the Senate blue instead of staying Republican, we now have a Democratic Senate, and it all hinged on these two races. And basically, it really set the tone. It has set the tone for what to expect in Congress and in the Senate for the next 4 years. And it gave a lot of confidence to the Democrats because Democrats were the ones who won this highly contested runoff, and it actually made a lot of the Republicans very upset about the way that the race took place. And you have to admit, most people do admit, that the results of this contributed to some of the discontent and rancor that some of the people were feeling, that led to the siege on the Capitol not much later after this runoff took place. So we are really excited tonight to talk a little bit more about it, and Jackson Boaz should be joining us any second. And in the meantime, let me just say that Ovis is really happy to welcome Jackson. Jackson, I see you there. Do you see me?
Yes, I do. How's it going?
I'm doing really well. Doing really well. Let's see that shirt. Is that a John Ossoff shirt?
Yes, it is. It was actually very unintentional. I just got home and I was like, hey, I'm still wearing my John Ossoff sweatshirt. So always on brand.
Well, that's going to be a collector's item, I think, one day, because it's definitely a historical artifact at this point. Because you were involved in a race that people are going to be talking about for many years to come, and you must be proud of that, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Proud of, the small bit that I was able to contribute to just an amazing, huge team that worked so hard to flip not one but two Senate seats. It's just incredible.
Well, as I was explaining to the audience just before you popped up, earlier this month, Georgia held a historic election for two Senate seats that determined control of the U.S. Senate. And we have heard stories about the results of the election, but not much has been shared about what happened during the campaign. And one of my colleagues today said that it's interesting that it's almost like talking about the results of the Super Bowl game, but not really talking about, the plays that took place that allowed whichever team won to actually win. So we talked to you about this before you left and went down there, and now we can do the post game. So let me just tell You already know this stuff, but I'm going to tell the audience a little bit about Jackson Boaz. He is from Healdsburg, California, here in the Bay Area, which is a very popular spot for wineries and also a lot of politics, actually. Um, Jackson has been active in politics since grade school, an intern for State Senator Mike McGuire, who I know. He has run campaigns for local elected officials here in the Bay Area. Jackson is also on the board of the California Young Democrats as the North Coast Regional Director.
Yep.
Fancy. I'm sure
Thank you.
that's a really, that it sounds like an awesome post to have. And as I was saying earlier, after the November election, Jackson moved to Georgia to join the successful campaign to elect Democratic Senate candidates earlier this month. So, last time we talked, Jackson, you had just finished a successful campaign for Congress member Cindy Axne's reelection campaign in 2020 in Iowa. And then
Indeed.
you were headed down south to Georgia. Now tell me, what did you do for the campaign and what was it like?
Yeah, no, a lot has changed since the last time we talked. I know last time I was sitting in a hotel room in Atlanta trying to figure out what the heck was going on. I ended up actually working as a digital organizer on John Ossoff's campaign, though I will say that I'm speaking for myself, not the campaign or Senator Ossoff. It's so good to say. But yeah, so I ended up working in the digital realm for John. So that included doing some of our short code texting, like the really annoying texts you get from the 5-digit number. Also, a lot of community based relational organizing stuff, and just helping out in the digital department and all kinds of fun things that we were doing.
And was that digital outreach just in Georgia, or I mean, as you said, was some of your work being reflected in texts that I was getting here in the Bay
Yeah,
Area and people?
yeah. So John Ossoff's campaign was so extraordinary in that it was generating so much excitement and interest in Georgia and obviously around the country. And though, of course, our digital organizing was focused on turning out Georgians to vote, so much of our digital engagement and volunteer help came from out of state. So when I was sending out a blast text to say, hey, come to this phone bank, if you're here in California, you can still join a Zoom and make some calls into Georgia. So yeah, it was absolutely nationwide outreach when it comes to mobilizing voters.
Okay. Well, it's interesting, this race. A lot of people were holding their breath because, I mean, Georgia has an interesting history when it comes to politics and when it comes to party politics. Um, you know, uh, Civil rights era, when people think of the South and they think of Georgia, they think of, some horrible things that happened during the civil rights era and the kind of fighting that people had to do to try to reclaim their rights as voters in Georgia. So, how did Georgia's history when it comes to civil rights end up playing a role?
Yeah. So what I'll say is that I was very grateful to be a part of an operation that or work that has been going on for decades, right? To turn Georgia blue. Stacey Abrams, is probably the clearest embodiment of that work, but so many local community organizers who have been fighting to flip Georgia for years. And I think a lot of that is in recognition of the fact that we think of Georgia as a red state, and Georgia's
Mm-hmm.
history, isn't the most beautiful in a lot of areas. So the fact of the matter is, it's so fulfilling and so incredible to be able to turn that around and work for a candidate who is fighting, for a new civil rights act, stuff like that.
Yeah. I mean, it was an interesting race for me. My very first job out of college was in Augusta, Georgia, at a TV station there, and I didn't know what to expect because I grew up thinking of Georgia as this red state, full of conservatives and old plantations, and I mean, I didn't know, and I remember someone said to me, because I had been thinking about taking a job in Boston or taking a job in Augusta, Georgia, and he said, I can't imagine why you would take the Augusta job as a person of color. What the heck are you going to Georgia for? But but it seems like for this race, I mean, people were open. They were open to change, and the stereotype of a southern state like Georgia may not be as accurate as a lot of people in the rest of the country have always thought. Right?
Yeah, and I'll just say, I think it just goes to show when we're thinking about organizing, we need to be thinking about this as we shouldn't be deciding who should and shouldn't be organized. We have to organize everywhere. We said that on Warren's campaign, and I still say it now. Georgia is blue today because we have been organizing there. I won't say we, because Georgians have been organizing there for decades to turn that state blue. And it takes really hard work. And we can do that anywhere so long as we're willing to put in the time and the effort and the money to turn states that look red, that we think of as red, to blue states. And, uh, you know, everyone is worth organizing. And it's just a matter of making sure we're recognizing that. Georgia is a wonderful example of how that can work.
And who were some of the organizers? I mean, what groups were down there, pounding the pavement in Georgia?
Yeah, so it was really incredible with this runoff to see everyone getting involved, right? It was the biggest race in the country, obviously, but also just this super historic moment. And so many groups, national, local groups, were getting involved. You have big groups like the New Georgia Project, uh, building out big organizations there, but also just so many local Democratic parties and even nonpartisan groups turning up to mobilize voters, to engage voters, which is really rare, that amount of interest in a race. So many groups having such a big effect, and like the I really truly believe that it's every single one of those efforts that leads us to winning, and it just goes to show that even a Democratic club here in California making some calls into Georgia might turn around a couple votes. And every single effort like that matters so much in a race as close as that. And, we won by a pretty nice margin, but that race could have been so much closer. And all of those efforts compounded definitely made that difference and built that field margin.
I mean, it seemed like such a daunting task trying to localize and engage these voters, but you guys did it. I mean, what were some of the tactics that you were able to use?
Yeah, and I'm not going to take credit for any of these things because we had
I understand.
some of the best, just most creative people on this team that I've ever seen. But you even saw, John Ossoff making headlines with his TikTok. He was engaging younger voters, whether they were in Georgia or outside of Georgia, to vote if they're in Georgia, or phone bank or text bank, or donate if they're out of Georgia. A really incredible program called Artists for Ossoff, investing in doing street art, making murals to engage voters. Really, a program that I ran was called Adopt Your Block, where we basically equipped volunteer leaders in low voter propensity, or high potential neighborhoods, with the tools to relationally organize their neighborhoods. Start the ask by saying, hey, do you want a yard sign, and turning that into, hey, do you want to volunteer? So just a combination of so many really creative efforts. The community mobilizers program, which hired 2,000 Georgians, none of whom had worked on campaigns before, or at least most of whom who had not, and paid them to just engage their communities and reach voters that we would never have reached through a traditional field program. So just so many amazing efforts that really all combined to build a really, really amazing operation.
Wow. So it definitely set some precedents. I mean, these are tactics that and strategies that we're going to see in campaigns from now on, I'm sure.
Yeah, I mean, I will say that no campaign that I run or work on from now on will not include Reach, our relational mobilizing or relational organizing tool. Just such powerful strategies. I think what we saw more than anything is that if you invest in a community and you adapt and organize relationally and work within, the way a community is already working instead of just parachuting in and trying to like do your own thing, it works. It works so well. So, any race that I'm working on in the future, whether it's small or big, I'm going to be really looking out for and hoping to see a lot of these tactics that we saw because this whole cycle, right? We saw the power of relational and digital organizing, whether that was Pete's Iowa campaign. I didn't work for Mayor Pete in Iowa, but his relational program was just so powerful. Ed Markey up in Massachusetts, and then John Ossoff. That intersection of relational and community organizing and a really strong digital operation to back that up is just really, really powerful and works so well.
Okay. And you found that people reacted pretty well to to this strategy. I mean, definitely there are voters out there. My mom doesn't know what TikTok is, but if she had gotten, if somebody said to her, "Oh, let me send you this TikTok. It's really interesting," she would never be able to figure that out.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
I
no,
hope she doesn't watch this because she'll be upset. But it's true.
yeah.
But definitely younger voters get it. So obviously there must have been, across the board, a lot of different ways to reach out to different demographics.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not just TikTok, right? Like we were building social media toolkits for people who wanted to post on their Facebook or their Twitter or their Instagram or whatever else, right? We were working, really hard to engage all kinds of different communities. So I will say, yeah, like it's, your mom may not be able to use TikTok, but if your mom's scrolling through Facebook and she sees one of her friends posting the, grab your mask, grab your ID, and go vote graphic from John Ossoff, she'd be like, hey, I forgot to go vote. I should go do that, right? So it's really just investing in organizing in kind of more unconventional ways because doors and phones and text are really important. But when like these people are being bombarded with phone calls, it's a little bit refreshing to be walking down the street and see an Ossoff mural and be like, hey, that's a really cool mural. Like that's creative. I've never seen that before, right? So it's a combination of all of them, I think.
What was it like for you to see young voters get really engaged and really involved in this?
Yeah, so I think it was really unprecedented on Ossoff's campaign to see like how many young people were just so excited about John and his candidacy, and also of course Reverend Warnock, but just John Ossoff's TikTok. I have friends here in California that have absolutely no interest in politics whatsoever, and they're like, "Hey, I saw a TikTok of a guy who's running for Senate. Like, aren't you working for him? It was really funny." Like, right? So it's just like that kind of organizing is so powerful, and that kind of outreach, right? Young voters respond really well when you meet them where they're at. And the fact of the matter is, when we're talking about how do you mobilize young voters, you hire young people. You get young people in here and you say, hey, help us run this stuff, right? I wasn't running the TikTok, but Megha, who was, she is so creative and so amazing, and like just so many people on the digital team were younger and understand these things, and instead of thinking about, hey, how do we mobilize young voters? Let's try some stuff. Hire a young person, pay them, and have them do it. It works so.
Yeah, I think oh, there you go. Sorry, I thought I lost you. Well, I mean, you and I know that participation from young voters typically can be a bit lower than a lot of the other age groups. What was it like in this race?
Yeah, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but it was really encouraging to see from a volunteer perspective how many young people were getting involved and getting involved with the campaign. I don't have youth turnout numbers, but I know that, Ossoff and his messaging specifically was really good when it came to young voters, right? Instead of like backing away from our priorities and being like, hey, like I'm more moderate, don't like blah blah blah, right? And being like, hey, here's what we need to do. We're doing $2,000 checks. We are going to legalize marijuana, right? All of these things that are very powerful and very like they are the democratic priorities, and just messaging those, young people respond really well to it.
Now, I mean, it was a nail biter. I stayed up. I stayed up late, to watch every single second of, when the results were coming in. What was the mood like um, throughout the campaign and on that night?
Yeah, the mood was amazing. And when you have an inspiring candidate and an inspiring team, that's exactly, how you should be feeling. And on election night, it was an incredible mood because we won Georgia, right? And it was because of organizing. It was because of investing in that state and organizing in those communities. So it was a really fantastic energy and just so exciting.
Yeah. And I mean, it's when you think about a recount, before the 2000 presidential election, I mean, I kind of just thought recounts were things that just people talked about but didn't really happen. And then, most of us lived through that. And as a reporter during that period of time, like I literally sat there at different precincts and watched people hold the ballots up to the light and try to figure out, the hanging chads and all of that stuff.
Right.
And, I mean, here it happened again for you guys. Do you think, I mean, a lot of people I know were concerned that, okay, there were these long, long lines in November and people turned out for that and it was pretty incredible. But were you concerned that people weren't going to do that all over again? Because I mean, it was miserable for some of the voters the first
Yeah.
time.
Yeah, absolutely. And a family member just told me we have a little bit of a family crisis going on, so I might have to run
Okay.
very quickly here. But I will say, yes, I was, I think all of us were worried about turnout, and that's why investing in our turnout operation was so exciting. And I, of course, was worried about, are people going to show up again? But they did because they were excited about the candidates and because we invested in getting them to turn out.
Okay, I'm going to let you go, but my last question is there a way that you can still be involved? I mean, obviously, I would think that you probably want to be in
Yep.
DC working with Asaf.
So I don't, as of right now, I'm not going to DC to work for Ossoff. I'm doing other campaign stuff, just volunteering right now, but we'll hopefully land on another campaign pretty soon.
Okay. And I mean, what Ovis is all about is misinformation. We try to keep misinformation out of the news, and definitely you guys battled that in this campaign.
We
Even
did,
about dogs.
yes,
That's the
we did,
craziest
and
thing.
yes, and I'll just say it was really encouraging to see us putting out positives and putting out things showing what our real priorities were. And I really appreciate you having me this evening. I'm so sorry that I have to run
It's
a little
okay.
bit early.
I completely understand. I understand. Thank you
Thank you.
so much. It was so great to talk to you again, Jackson.
Amazing.
And yeah, keep coming back.
Thank you so much. I'll talk to you soon.
Have a good evening. Well, that was Jackson Boaz, who worked very hard on the John Ossoff campaign, the runoff election in Georgia, just a couple of weeks ago. So much has happened since then that it feels like it was 6 months ago, but it literally was just at the beginning of this month that runoff election took place, and it flipped the Senate, and so now Democrats have control of the Senate, which is something that seemed unthinkable for a while to a lot of people. But in this campaign, I mean, they worked hard. And as you saw, he said that there were a lot of grassroots efforts, there were a lot of strategies that a lot of other elected officials had not really made use of before, but it really helped get the youth vote out and bring out a lot of people who might not have shown up before and waited in those lines on two separate occasions to vote in John Ossoff and Reverend Warnock. So Everyone, thank you so much for joining us here on Ovis ZapChat. We had a great time talking tonight, and once again, just want to let you guys know what we're all about. Ovis is all about bringing you the truth, not what the corporate media puts out there, which is not always the absolute truth and is often editorialized. What we do here is the stories that you want us to do, and we make sure that they are absolutely factual and accurate. And this is news by the people, for the people. That's what we're here for. And please join us on Ovis.news and every week here on Sunday nights on Ovis Zap Chat. I'm Tracy Grant. Take care. Bye.